Well, that's certainly a thing that happened. It's literally just started raining outside the instant I started recording this. That's if that isn't a sign from above, then I don't know what is. Why do I sound drunk? Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, welcome to A-Shade Doctor Who, where today we have my thoughts on Power of the Doctor, the Centenary special. Now, I'm just going to say right off the bat, there's an awful lot to unpack with this one, but I'm going to try and cram it down into a shorter video, sort of akin to the thoughts videos that I've done for the previous episodes of this era. In all honesty, I think this particular story is going to need a much longer, more in-depth video to discuss it in a bit further down the line, so maybe, I don't know, give it a couple of months and I might have a proper fucking video about this episode, but for now we're just going to do the immediate thoughts. Also, sorry if this video is a couple of days later than I would normally try and post. Things have been a bit wonky with the schedule so far, given how I came off my break so close to this episode airing. It's kind of been a bit of a mess, but yeah. If all goes to plan, this video should be up within 2 or 3 days of the episode airing, so if I achieve that, then leave a like. And that's how you farm likes on YouTube. So yeah, anyone who's seen this episode will know there's really way too much to talk about that I could fit into one of these kinds of videos, so I'm going to see if I can try to pick everything out that I really want to bring up and discuss, and a lot of the minor things I'll probably give a quick mention to at best, but yeah. First of all, I'm going to say this was a really strong episode, probably one of the strongest overall from this whole era. I know that's technically not saying much, but I honestly think that even in comparison to other eras of the show that are a bit more universally loved, I still think this would hold up as a pretty strong episode. Is it still somewhat plagued by a lot of the negative tropes of the Chibnall era? Yeah, here and there, a bit of expositionary dialogue, a few things that don't make sense, kind of glossing over some things, pacing issues a bit off in some places, but hey, honestly at this point, A, I've got low standards, and B, I've learned to accept that with this era, and I honestly don't care. I just get on and enjoy the story. Over-obsessive haters on the internet, fight me, I don't care. Goodbye. Was there a lot going on in this episode? Yes. Was there perhaps a bit too much going on in this episode? Possibly. There was a lot going on in this episode, even for a 90-minute runtime, but I think they balanced it out pretty much as well as you could have, I think, with this. Dalek stuff kind of got silent. I feel like the whole Daleks part in this episode was probably just put in there to have the Daleks in, but at this point, given out it's a big celebratory episode, I don't really mind the being in it because it's kind of part and parcel to the whole celebratory nature of the show at this point. You've got to have the Daleks in, and not just because of Terry Nation Estate's contractual obligation, which may or may not exist. BBC, what are you doing? Focus was much more on the Cybermen and the Master aspect, which I'm glad they picked up on the whole regenerating Cybermen being allied with the Master thing that they left off from a couple of years back at the end of Series 12, because I was wondering if they was going to pick up on that, because that did seem like quite a nice idea, even if they didn't really explore it all that much in this episode. Either they kind of just ended up reverting back to the regular Cybermen after a while, and then they just sort of mixed and matched it. So when it comes to the actual plot of this one, honestly I think the trademark quote for this story should be, "There's a lot to unpack," because that pretty much applies in just about every goddamn scene. Talk about the fan service and all the other cool stuff later on, but for now, plot-wise, like I said, there's an awful lot going on. I think it meshes together quite well in a 90-minute format. This is more akin to a sort of classic Who length runtime. I think I'm going to get some of the Timeless Child stuff, or lack thereof, funnily enough, for this episode out of the way first. So we'll talk about that and then we'll get on to some other stuff. So, final episode of the Chibnall era, and does it resolve his big Timeless Child story arc in any kind of satisfying way? I mean, honestly, not really, to be honest. I mean, given how many people were absolutely furious about that plot point, to begin with, I don't think there was ever going to be any way of satisfyingly wrapping that up for anybody. I mean, I would have been happy with just about anything, as long as they explain it well and it doesn't feel like a complete cop-out. Even right from the get-go in the opening scene where we have the Cybermen trying to kidnap that young girl that was being transported on the space train. They never really explained much about that, did they? Then it turned out to be, the little girl form turned out just to be the disguise of this big conscious energy thing, which I can't remember the name of. A little embarrassing, but we'll just call it the glowing space octopus for now. So you think with this glowing space octopus thing looking like a young girl who kind of does... I mean, the first thing that popped into my head once she showed up is, okay, so this episode is going to revolve around that little girl being kidnapped by the Cybermen who are working with the Master, and it's going to tie into some kind of Timeless Child thing, as we've been exploring for like the last 2 series. But surprisingly, that didn't end up actually happening. At one point I was thinking perhaps where we've got the glowing space squid thing on this planet, and the Doctor goes to find it, and there's a wormhole there, and you might remember that the Timeless Child was found beneath a wormhole by Tecteun originally. I was thinking perhaps there'd be some kind of, you know, showing the origin of the whole timeless trial thing, or perhaps they revealed it to be like a bootstrap paradox of some description, with either the Master or the Doctor actually initiating it in the first place, thus making it a timey-wimey paradoxy thing. Well, that didn't end up happening. Basically no real payoff or explanation to any of the stuff revolving around the glowing space squid. Either they really couldn't be bothered to expand on that at all, which seems kind of strange given how they kind of hyped it up in the first like act of the episode pretty much, or they kind of left it open to interpretation, which is what I'd like to believe. I feel like they left it kind of open-ended so you can make your own assumptions about it. Honestly, I feel like that was probably the safest route that they could have taken. I think in all honesty, I think that's probably the best way they could have gone about doing it, because Lord knows any other explanation would have just disintegrated this fan base even further than it already has been. A little bit disappointed they didn't really do any kind of meaningful resolution with the Timeless Child plot. Pocket Watch with the pre-Hauntwood Doctor's memories is still somewhere in the depths of the TARDIS as well. I've got a feeling they probably won't be touching back on that at all anytime soon. But yeah, I guess they gave it a good shot. We got an open ending that leaves it all up to interpretation. We can leave this whole suddenly lore-heavy era of the show behind us now going forwards. It was what it was. Personally, I enjoyed it quite a little bit, even if it did fall flat at times and didn't have much of a meaningful resolution. But hey, what does nowadays? Am I rambling? Probably. Do I know where I'm going with this? No. I'm just going to hit myself with a Jurassic Park book. Take a drink of water and try and figure out what the bloody hell to say next. Damn you, Chibnall, you've broken my brain again. Anyway, let's move on to something else, because I feel like I've made a good enough point on that now. One thing I didn't like was I was a bit disappointed that John Bishop was barely in it, Dan's character. Now, I should probably do like a whole section in this video about John Bishop's character. I think I'll do that now, actually. So, let's talk about John Bishop as Dan Lewis for a bit. With Dan Lewis, as a character, I'm not really sure how to feel about him. Obviously only in 9 episodes, or well, 8 really, because he's barely in this one. One of the shortest serving companions we've ever had, I think, on the show. Kind of like Bradley Walsh, beyond a few nice character moments, he really only made much of an impression in Doctor Who meme circles more than anything else. Probably more than Bradley Walsh did as Graham. But yeah, the thing with Dan is, I like how he was introduced at the start of the Flux story arc. There's a nice setup with him and everything, but I feel like we barely got to know him. Even though he's technically been the Doctor's companion for a whole 3 years from an in-universe perspective because of the time shift that happened in the middle of Series 13, the main bulk of the series. Yet I feel like he's had about as much character development as like Dodo or Mel in her original run on the show. I'm not sure who that's the bigger insult to be honest, out of the 3, but hey, you decide. But yeah, honestly, I don't mind having short-lived companions. I mean, Harry was only in for like, what, 6 stories, and then he came back for a guest appearance a couple episodes later, and that was it for him, but he made a lasting impression. He's quite a beloved character. So you can have short-lived companions that manage to make a really good impression over the course of like just a handful of episodes. But I feel like with Dan, yeah, he was a good character. If perhaps kind of generic and just like a comic relief replacement for Bradley Walsh. But hey, I enjoyed him about as much as I enjoyed Graham, so there's that. So I don't mind him being kind of short-lived. I just don't feel like we ever got to know him all that well. Kind of surprised his house is still missing. It doesn't look like there's been any kind of building development going on that street. Did the Liverpool Council just not notice an entire house missing? It's been gone for like, what, a year at this point from the universe perspective? There's just been a house missing for a year! And a bloke's gone missing off the face of the earth. He's been living in the past for 3 years and fucking around in space and then fighting pirates and lizard men. Has nobody noticed a missing house on a street in Liverpool? I guess they're all preoccupied with the universe ending and Sontarans, Daleks and Cybermen all invading at once, and whoever the fuck the Grand Serpent was, they never brought him back to explain who the hell he was. I'm mad about that. Was honestly expecting John Bishop to be in this episode for more than like 10 minutes of the 90-minute runtime. He was there as a regular companion in the opening scene, then they drop him back on Earth and he's just like, don't bother coming back for me, I'm going to stay behind, and then we just don't see him at all until the final scene. I think that's the first time we've had a companion leave at the beginning of an episode and have them legitimately not turn up as a proper character for the rest of that episode. It's nice that at the very least they included him in the scene at the end with all the companions and everything. And don't worry, I'm going to gush about all the classic Doctors and companions having the little cameos in this later on as well, and a lot of other things. I just found it weird how Dan was used in this episode. Yeah, it is what it is. Nice character. Very short-lived, didn't really get to know him all that well, kind of like Bill. But hey, I'm sure in like 10 years' time, Big Finish will give him a spin-off with Graham. I would pay money. I would pay money to have a spin-off Bradley Walsh and John Bishop just going around the world with their psychic paper and just doing like a comic relief version of Torture or something. I would pay money for that. I'm going to get a job at the BBC and pitch that. You can't stop me. Anyway, yeah, moving away from John Bishop's character for a bit, let's see what else can we talk about. I haven't even mentioned Ace and Tegan returning in this yet, have I? Ace and Tegan were great in this. Don't think there was anything really out of character from them. Tegan still has the attitude and the lip that she always has. I think I'd be disappointed if they didn't make her kind of bitchy, to be honest, because that's kind of her one of her stable character traits. And Ace being in this, I mean, come on, just having Ace in there at all was great, but yeah, I think they nailed the writing and the characterisation for those two characters pretty well. And honestly, I'm just glad that we got them back at all. I mean, I would have been happy with just one of them. I'd have been happy with just Ace coming back, but the fact they brought Tegan back, I never would have thought in a million years that Tegan would come back of all people. Ace, given how popular she is and given how involved she's been with the Doctor Who fandom, especially in the last few years, I kind of thought there was a good possibility, but Tegan of all people, that was really out of left field when she came up in the trailer back in Easter, but yeah. And it's nice to see that Kate showed up this time, and not the cardboard cutout Kate that had like half a page's worth of lines and stuff to do that we saw in the last couple episodes of the main series last year. They actually bothered to put proper Kate in this episode. I'm still really mad about the sheer way they wasted Kate's character at the end of Flux, but they made up for it here and she's pretty good. Oh, and did anyone else think to themselves, in the scene where the Master turns to Kate and says, "Your father was an idiot," did anyone else just like internally scream at the Master saying, "Don't you fucking dare say that about Brigadier"? Honestly, I think that's the most I've ever hated the Master in this entire show. It's funny because you think I'm joking, but I'm not. Okay, I am joking a little bit, but I mean, anyone who talks shit about the Brigadier deserves a fucking backhand from the depths of oblivion, let's be honest here. Anyway, moving on. I think I'll take this opportunity to point out a few things that I thought didn't make sense in the episode. The Master having the shrunken lone Cyberman from back in Series 12 and giving it to Tegan to then bring into Unit Base to smuggle in the Cybermen. That's fine, that's a pretty cool idea. A bit of a Genesis arc kind of rehash in a way, but I like the idea regardless. One thing I don't like about that plan is the fact that he says tissue compression is reversible. At no point in the entire show's history, ever since the concept was introduced back in the 70s, have we ever seen any indication of tissue compression being reversible. But hey, I guess plot convenience, so we just get tiny little Cyberman, giant Cyberman, who just opens up with more Cybermen. And the other thing, the whole thing with the Master regenerating the Doctor forcibly into himself, I mean, it works well for shock value, and we get some pretty fun scenes later on as a consequence, but I don't think it really works from an in-universe scientific standpoint. Am I really going to sit here and try and dissect the scientific plausibility of Doctor Who scenarios? Why am I even trying to do that? One thing I was thinking to myself though was, surely that wouldn't work, because they'd still be the Doctor. How can you turn one Time Lord into a whole other Time Lord just by regenerating them? I don't think that would have made sense. Surely you would have to do a brain transplant to actually make them into you. Like, come on Master, think it through. But I guess due to plot convenience that just worked anyway. Yeah, don't really mind it, to be honest. It's kind of stupid, but at this point, I mean, come on, doesn't every episode have something like that in that's just kind of off the wall, batshit crazy? Just accept it at this point, come on guys. So now that I think about it, there isn't really much in the way of obvious motivation for all the villains in this, beyond just being evil, but I guess, I don't know. Given all the other stuff going on, I think that was probably one of the easier things to overlook. But I guess you could just chalk it down to the Daleks being the Daleks, the Cybermen being the Cybermen, and the Master still being mad at the Doctor for events outside of her control, because he's kind of a petty maniac like that, and that's why it's so fun to watch, but you know. Honestly, it didn't bother me enough to really make me mad or anything, so I'm not going to sit here and try and dissect the whole reasoning why none of that makes sense. So let's move on to, quick side note, I felt like Vinder was kind of wasted in this one. I thought there's going to be more to him in this and that other than just turning up for the sake of it, but hey, yeah. So let's just get all the fan service stuff out of the way with, and I can move on to some of the other stuff. A lot of fan service in this. Is it kind of silly? Maybe, but hey, I like fan service. All the different costumes from the previous Doctors, the Doctor Master, whatever the fuck you want to call him, playing the recorder, I like that. The previous Doctor showing up, I love that. I heard there was a rumour about that before the episode airing, so I thought that might be the case, and sure enough it happened, and I loved it. Especially Paul McGann showing up, because he's long overdue for a proper reappearance on screen. I saw reference to the Hartnell story, Dalek's Master Plan in there, where the Master does like the reverse and says the Master's Dalek Plan and everything. If you're a fan, then you know. Also, can we just take a moment to appreciate the the Master as Rasputin thing. Genius idea to make the Master Rasputin. The whole dance scene with the actual Rasputin song, was that kind of a rehash of Series 3's, whatever the song was when he was on the Valiant wheeling the older Doctor around? Was it kind of a rehash of that? Yes. But hey, that's just another bit of fan service in an episode specifically built to include it, I think. The companions in the ending scene, nice to see them come back. Nice that they chose a few of the less obvious companions as well. I mean, obviously we got Yaz, Tegan and Ace in there, who were in there as well, and Kate, Graham and Dan showing up as well. Nice to see them including Katie Manning in there, and wasn't expecting Bonnie Langford and William Russell of all people to come in either. Them two in particular were a nice treat to see in there, very unexpected. Really enjoyed all the stuff about the Cybermen infiltrating the unit and just saying, fuck it, let's set up a conversion centre here, because that's obviously what the Cybermen do. That felt like a good classic Base Under Siege style story. Honestly, that would make a really good episode in and of itself, I think, if that was just a regular episode. I think I did touch upon this earlier on in the video near the beginning, the whole Daleks drilling into the Earth thing. That's kind of a rehash of Dalek Invasion of Earth. It's not rehash, it's fan service. There's your new motto. Really enjoyed the little moments between the 5th Doctor hologram and Tegan, and then the 7th Doctor hologram and Ace. Those bits in particular. Nice little moments and calling back to the whole fan servicey side. But yeah, there's an awful lot more that I could be saying stuff about in this episode. I think though we're just going to wrap it up there and just get on to talk about the sort of last ending bits to finish off this video. You know, for an era that's had all those ups and downs, which personally I've quite enjoyed, probably more than a fair few of the people on the internet that have been voicing their opinions on it. But for an era that has had a lot of its ups and downs, I think the ending's about as good as they probably could have made it. Definitely a far cry from where we started out with this era of Series 11. I think they've really improved on a lot of things since then. Surprisingly, they had a really good ending in there. The whole Doctor and Yaz sit on top of the TARDIS overlooking the Earth having an ice cream thing. Is it a bit cheesy? Yeah. Is it still a nice little scene to round things off? Yeah. Well, I find it funny how the Doctor just starts regenerating in the TARDIS, and then she's just like, let's go get an ice cream for a bit, and then I guess she just casually holds it off this whole time. You're holding off of goddamn regeneration. Last time you did that, you was a 12th Doctor and you nearly died trying to do it. Not kind of sure what kind of mad consistency nonsense we're pulling off there, but hey. But yeah, overall, for once, not a rushed ending in a Chibnall era episode, which I know has become kind of a staple of this era. Of a lot of build-up, which tends to go kind of well, and then the ending does tend to get quite rushed. But I think here they nailed it pretty much perfectly. Nice to finally have a regeneration outside the TARDIS for once as well, because we haven't had one of them since, I think, the 8th Doctor's regeneration in the Night of the Doctor minisode, actually. So it's nice that they're breaking the mold a little bit there. Love the whole visual of the regeneration on the cliff top as well. I'm glad they did decide to do something a bit different this time round and not just have them in the TARDIS. Rumours were true as well about Jodie regenerating into David Tennant, so I'm assuming that's going to be the overarching plot of the 60th anniversary, the Doctor trying to figure out why the hell they've changed back into 10 rather than going into 14. I wonder why the clothes changed as well. I'm thinking perhaps the only other time the Doctor's regenerated and their clothes have changed at the same time was when the first Doctor regenerated into the second Doctor. And obviously that was just a production oversight back then because it was 1966 and they really couldn't afford to figure that out, obviously. They had a budget of £10 per episode and they had to make it in like a day. Some mistakes are going to be made. But here I feel like it was a deliberate choice to change the outfit, either to just save time or, I don't know, maybe it's an indication of a wider point at play. I wasn't really too keen on the rumours of Jodie regenerating into David at first, but I think, honestly, as long as there's a good explanation for it in the 60th, I don't think I'll mind. One thing I don't want them to do is officially class David Tennant as the 14th Doctor and then have Ncuti Gatwa classed as the 15th Doctor, because I feel like that's a waste of an entire regeneration if they do that. And though it's not the same thing that they did with the War Doctor, because the War Doctor lived for hundreds of years if you go into the audios and the books, and he was an actual incarnation that wasn't just around purely for a few specials, and that being his entire lifetime. So I'm hoping this is some kind of glitched out transitional phase in the regeneration that's being caused by something which I'm hoping we'll get the explanation for in the 60th specials next year. Am I reading too much into the simple fact of the clothes changing at the same time as the regeneration? Maybe, but I'm fully convinced that that's an indication of some wider thing at play here, and you can't convince me otherwise. Where's my tinfoil hat internet conspiracy theorist initiated? So that was my thoughts on Power of the Doctor, the Centenary special, and the end of the Whittaker era. Thinking of perhaps, I don't know, maybe in a couple to a few months' time, maybe compiling together some kind of big, long video where I just discuss this entire era in more detail at some point. If that's something that people would be interested in, then let me know in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already. What did you think of this episode? Comment down below. And now we bid farewell to this era and on to 2023. Bye bye. Bye bye.